All right, so now on to part 2 of the video. So make sure we're recording. Perfect. So let's get on to part 2. So part 2 is going to be discussing mood disorders, dissociative personality disorders, schizophrenia, somatic symptom disorders, and finishing up with the personality disorders. So one thing to keep in mind is specifically with the personality disorders, dissociative identity disorders, and with the schizophrenia, these are considered the more severe mental disorders. And when I say severe mental disorders, I say they very much impact one's ability to function in life. So that, keeping in mind, that is the key point. It's how does it impair their ability to function? So let's first kind of go through a review of what we're going to be finishing up on and what we've previously discussed in our first video. So section 1 was all about defining abnormal behavior. So what's it all about? What does it involve? And then from there, it's we discussed the DSM, so how it classifies abnormal behavior. And then we discuss the anxiety, obsessive compulsive, and trauma-related disorders. So, as I just previously said, these are the ones that we're going to hit on. There we are. So, I'm not going to, you notice that somatic symptom disorder, and I did previously say that one, but we're going to spend a lot of time on that one. We're mostly going to focus on dissociative, mood disorder, schizophrenia, and finishing up with personality disorders. So I'll go through this too. So you're going to be able to tell the difference between the various dissociative disorders and somatic symptom disorders, be able to distinguish the difference between the symptoms of depressive and bipolar disorders. I'm going to talk about a little bit about the current understanding of biopsychological factors, biopsychosocial factors. Easy to write, not easy to say. And then discuss a little bit those factors, why it makes women more vulnerable to depression. And then we're going to talk about schizophrenia and then discuss a couple of symptoms associated with that, specifically positive and negative symptoms. And then section 7, we're going to finish up by discussing a little bit of the personality disorders. So let's get into it. Woo, yay! So first and foremost, we need to define dissociative disorders. So we've actually discussed disassociation a little bit. So the example always used is you've been driving somewhere and then you get to your destination and you don't even remember driving there. It was like you got in your car, you started driving, and then boom, you're there. Or you missed a part of a conversation, but the person you're having a conversation with actually thinks you've been listening the whole time, where it appears you've been attending class, but you're actually just daydreaming what you're going to do for the rest of the week. These are very common dissociative experiences. So dissociative disorder is and dissociation in general is marked by a loss of awareness. So you just don't become aware. You lose a sense of your surroundings, what you're doing, and the reason why dissociative disorders exist and how it's different from regular just general dissociation is, and you're going to get sick of me saying this, is the loss of awareness is seriously interferes with one's ability to function. They can't hold a job because they lose their sense of awareness. They have trouble with relationships because of this loss of awareness. So there are three disorders specifically we're going to talk about, but our main one we're going to discuss is dissociative identity disorder, which was previously actually known as multiple personality disorder. It's when one person has two or more personalities, and obviously that may cause them distress or impair their function. But just I'll hit on depersonalization and dissociative amnesia a little bit. Depersonalization is just you actually feel detached from your own mental state or your body. So you almost feel like it's like a situation, and it's very hard to explain, so I apologize. And that's why we don't spend a lot of time on it, because there's not a lot known about these dissociative disorders comparative to, say, mood disorders or depression and things such as that. And I'll get into our next slide why that might be. But you almost are like, I am not myself. I am not living my own life right now. I'm another person in a way. I am not my own self. So it's similar to dissociative identity disorder, but they don't have a separate personality. They just feel almost detached from themselves. And dissociative amnesia is just amnesia, but it's not caused by substance abuse or brain injury. So that's the only difference between dissociative amnesia and, say, retrograde or antegrade amnesia that we previously discussed in the memory chapter. So let's get into dissociative identity disorder. So, excuse me. So the disorder, as I previously said, these two or more personalities exist within the same person. They're known actually as alters. So the separate personality is an alter, meaning, let's say one personality is you. So, and then your second personality would then be the alter. So each separate personality is known as the alter. You would actually be known as the host personality, or if you want to think of it, the main personality. So as I say right here, it's the one asking for treatment. So each personality has their own way of being that's different from the host personality. So it carries themselves in a different way. It has different thoughts. It has different speech characteristics. Excuse me one moment. And I've been told by a professor who actually did a lot of clinical studies that with dissociative identity disorder, it's been found that one alter can have like diabetes, while the host or main personality does not suffer from diabetes. So it's very interesting. It's very fascinating. So, and each alter has a specific function. So, how the host personality, the person suffering from DID or dissociative identity disorder, may find out if they're not aware that they are suffering it. My throat is so dry. I apologize. They may notice money missing for their bank account that they don't remember spending. They may notice random packages showing up from the house that they don't remember purchasing. And it's also been found that almost all people who suffer from dissociative identity disorder experience chronic childhood physical or sexual abuse, specifically at the hands of other family members. So it's thought that the alter, these other personalities that develop, a specific function and helping the person work through those memories that they suffered from the abuse. There's been a wide increase of cases since 1980, so about, goodness, 40 years. Wow, just made myself feel old. And it's actually more frequently diagnosed in the US compared to other countries. So the reason why I specifically mentioned on that last slide is it's not a lot of known is because how do you exactly verify these claims of amnesia or blackouts? They tell you that it's true, but how do you verify and get evidence to support their claims that they're suffering from these amnesias and blackouts? Because the comorbidity or the tying of other disorders, if you want to think of it that way, with people with DID is very common. So people who have dissociative identity disorder have usually been diagnosed with other mental disorders, such as mood disorders, depression specifically. So, and finishing up, some psychologists actually question, as I previously stated, because of verifying these claims, of the validity of dissociative identity disorder. Some researchers in the field of psychopathology think that it represents an extreme form of PTSD, because it's been found that a subset of people with post-traumatic stress disorder actually experience these dissociative symptoms, especially those who've experienced repeated sexual trauma. So that's one thing that's been found as well. So that, like I said, we're really only going to focus in on DID, but that's kind of all you basically need to know. But one thing I do have, if I can pull it up, is a video of a very famous case of a black screen of somebody who has suffered from dissociative identity disorder. This was in, I can't remember the year, I want to say it was the 40s, 50s. So we'll just watch this together and I'll discuss it. So let me pause. So the main personality is Eve White. These are her characteristics. She seems very run-of-the-mill, very average. She is conventional in manner. That's to say that she's kind of an average person. She seems very reserved, and she seems to have a lot of tension in her life. Just to quickly summarize that. Oh, the mid-20th century.
How do you feel personally about it?
I want to get well. If that's the only way to get well, that's the way I want.
Do you feel that you'll be in any part of it?
No.
Does it cause you distress?
In a way.
So I'm just going to randomly pause this video. So in his line of questioning, one key question you just heard him ask is, does it cause you distress? If you remember all the way back in section 1, we discussed this idea of distress, inability to function. So they're looking to see, do these alters cause you distress? Do you think the treatment's going to cause you distress?
You feel she may not be taken care of? Do you regret going, or what's your feeling?
No, I'm tired.
So, Eve Black is actually one alter. What it says on the tin, she almost seems like the opposite of Eve White. So you'll see how these two women are two personalities, two personalities act very differently. So she is aware of her other personality. See that switch? Her posture changes. She becomes more relaxed, almost flirty in a way.
Got your first time? How do you like over?
I think it's really fun.
Hey,
Thank you.
hey,
I guess it is interesting in a way. I think it's more exciting than interesting.
how long have you been out? How long have you been out?
2 minutes old.
Mm-hmm.
Off and on all my life.
Oh, you like.
So been out meaning being the personality and control.
But you don't seem to have as much educational background. How is that?
I guess I just wasn't interested
Right.
in getting an education. You have to study.
Well, somebody had to study.
Not really, no. She didn't have to.
Well, she didn't know how to get an education, did she?
She really wasn't, no, but I did.
Why didn't you learn as she went along?
I guess I just didn't pay any attention.
Where were you when she studied?
I don't know. Just somewhere.
No, but you always knew what was going on. Did you have trouble coming out?
Yeah.
Could I speak with Eve White, please? Eve White? Feel all right?
So Jane is the second alter.
Could I speak with Jane? Jane?
It is real exciting.
You enjoy it.
Yes, I do.
How do you feel about the future?
I'm optimistic.
Do you think that you will be the surviving one?
I think that's difficult to say right now.
You feel hopeful?
Yes, I'd like to be.
What do you feel about the new girl?
Well, she seems like my own now. I've been around quite a while.
You're rather looking forward to it?
Yes.
You don't mind the responsibilities, obligation?
So the reason why I say that's actually one of the most famous, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can pull back the PowerPoint. There we are. There we are. Is because there actually was a movie based on Eve White and her two alters, known as the Three Faces of Eve. You can look it up. It's might be available. I think it came out 50s, 60s. Don't count me on that. I'm a psychology professor, not a media professor. So, as you're studying, it may be helpful to think about Eve White, Eve Black, and Jane, and how each of those personalities, you know, like when she would switch to say Eve Black, she would get very relaxed and, you know, like, you know, this is just great. I just love. While Eve White is very reserved and closed in on herself, and Jane seems very bubbly and, you know, calm. So, moving on from there, we'll hit on somatic symptom disorder. So let me get the There we are. So somatic symptom disorder is marked by, and when I say marked, just the main symptoms are physical complaints that have no apparent causes. So the symptoms are incredibly real to the person suffering, but the doctors cannot find any medical reason why they're experiencing the symptoms. So, and it's not like a faking thing per se. It's not like they're saying that they're having these symptoms, but they're not. For example, one can develop a severe rash, but they find no medical reason why they have that rash. That would be a similar to, like, say, a conversion disorder. It used to be known as gracious. Well, don't worry about what it used to be known. So all we really are going to focus on is somatic symptom disorder. That's kind of the catch-all main one. So they have to have 6 months of persistent physical complaints, and they're constantly obsessing about the symptoms they're having. And because of these symptoms, they cannot, well, it impedes with their ability to function, as I say. So the person seeks medical condition, but they can't find any reason why they're suffering from it. So, and then we'll hit on illness anxiety. Illness anxiety, actually, you can think of it as like extreme hypochondria. So you're just constantly worrying about having a serious illness. And they either frequently seek or avoid medical care. So, so they have no physical basis for suffering from a disorder, for suffering from a sickness. They may think that they have brain cancer, but there's no evidence to support their reasoning for why they have brain cancer. And the reason why I said it's, you could think of it as a severe hypochondria, is it actually used to be known as hypochondriasis. So there we are. So so they actually go through extensive medical testing, very invasive testing. They may even go through exploratory surgery to see if there's any reason behind why they feel they have this this illness. So when a doctor actually suggests that maybe it's not physical, there's an underlying mental issue or mental health problem, they're usually going to doctor shop. They find another physician instead of seeking mental health counseling. So, and then finally, about 1 to 5% of the population suffer from illness anxiety disorder. So, and finishing up, they actually think it's related to panic disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder. So their obsession is constantly worrying that they have a illness, so it causes them great anxiety. So their compulsion, what they feel compelled to do, is seek out medical care and treatment. So let's do a review. So dissociative disorders involve, let y'all read it for a moment, a splitting of one's conscious mind. So it's a lack of awareness. Alfonso has recurrent abdominal pain. The doctors have conducted numerous medical tests and find no physical cause for her symptoms. Alfonso appears to have a somatic symptom disorder. Very good. So she has recurrent abdominal pain. They've they found no physical cause for the abdominal pain, but the abdominal pain is incredibly real to her. And then, what do dissociative and somatic symptom disorders have in common? They may represent alternate expressions of anxiety. As I said, PTSD related to anxiety, while lost my train of thought. While somatic symptom disorders are also may be related to panic disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders. So moving on from there, we'll hit on the mood disorders. There we are. So significant change in one's emotional state. That is kind of the main marker of mood disorders. So these are going to sound very familiar to you because these are very commonly seen in media. So there's two specific types of mood disorders: depression or depressive disorders and bipolar disorders. So major depressive disorder is just a loss of interest or pleasure in activities, and then a depressed or so a lowered mood. And then they have to have 4 symptoms other than depression. Don't worry about those specific other symptoms, but you're more than welcome to look up in the DSM. I think they have some pages available online to there you go, to see the specific other symptoms discussed. So they must have these symptoms for at least 2 weeks, so 14 days. It must interfere with one's ability to function as usual. And then it's not due to general medical condition or effects of a substance. So a drug isn't causing them to feel this way, and they're not suffering from a physical medical condition that's giving them the depressed mood. So there's physical or cognitive symptoms. So changes in sleep patterns, changes in appetite, specifically with the sleep patterns. So they either sleep too much or too little, known as hypersomnia, that's too much, and insomnia, which we previously discussed, too little. They either are eating too much or not enough, and then with the changes in motor functioning, so they almost act sluggish and a loss of energy. They just want to sit around all day. They almost can't convince themselves to do anything else. So cognitive symptoms, so these would be the thoughts. So they have difficulty concentrating. They have exaggerating feelings of worthlessness or guilt and marked by thoughts of suicide. And then persistent depressive disorder is less severe but more chronic, so it lasts longer. So they just have a sad or downcast mood. So this is kind of a slightly silly example, but you could think of it as like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. So he always appears to be downcast and sad. So it lasts a longer period of time. So they actually have to show this depressed mood for 2 years for them to start diagnosing them with persistent depressive disorder. And then on from there, we have bipolar disorder. So that actually is a shift in mood. So they're either feeling really good or really bad. So there we are. So the one shift, so one pole hits the bipolar, 2 poles, is the symptoms are incredibly similar to major depressive disorder. Well, the other shift or other pole is known as mania or a manic state. So within mania, you can think of it as like the opposite of depression. So they're elevated, they're in an active emotion state. So they almost act high or euphoric. So they have a decreased need for sleep. So they may only sleep like 2 hours. They feel like they can conquer the world. they may decide to do kind of see what's a good example. So they almost feel like nothing can stop them. So they may engage in harmful behaviors. So they may feel like they could jump off a roof and survive. So the mania is just a euphoric state. So they feel like nothing can stop them. With cyclothymic disorder, it's very similar to bipolar, but it's more chronic. So it's less severe and more chronic. So they have milder periods of mania and moderate depression. So they don't seem to switch through those poles over like days or weeks at a time. These are like months. And they have to show these symptoms 2 years as well before they would think about diagnosing them with this. And then the median, so the average onset for bipolar disorder is late adolescence, so 17 to 22, 23. So let's discuss a little bit about the research on bipolar, or excuse me, mood disorders. So there are biological factors involved. People whose parents suffer from mood disorders are going to be more likely to suffer from mood disorders. If an identical twin is diagnosed with having, say, bipolar disorder, the other identical twin is going to be at a higher probability for developing the disorder compared to fraternal twins who don't share who are not, as you know, identical twins share the exact same DNA. Fraternal twins do not. So, psychological factors. So it could be due to insecure attachments, abuse that they suffered as a young child. See what else? Oh, learned helplessness could be a part of it as well, which we discussed in the previous chapter. It could be due to negative thinking. So they tend to ruminate meaning to focus on thoughts. So people who are depressed spend a lot of time thinking about their depression and why they're depressed, making them more likely to feel depressed. So people who only focus on how they feel without doing anything about how they're feeling could be the one factor in how depression or mood disorders develop. And sociocultural factors, people who suffer from mood disorders tend to be from a lower social status. So there also is a relationship, so a correlation between someone who's led an incredibly stressful life and compared to the onset or beginning of depression. Especially among those people who have relatives who suffer from mood disorders or depression. So that's what I mean by genetically predisposed. Somebody else in their family suffers from it as well. So one thing that we do know about depression is the fact it's diagnosed more frequently in women compared to men. So that brings about a lot of questions. So are the symptoms more common among men, or are women compared to men, or are there other reasons why they are just identified more in women? One thing, and I want you to think about this as you're writing in your notes, a couple reasons why, and I'll give you one, and I want you to see what else you can come up with. On average, women just go to the doctor more than men. So it's possible that it's not more commonly seen in women compared to men. It's just that more women are going to the doctor to be diagnosed with it. Makes sense? It's something that we discussed in our first section as well. Let's do a review. This is a short one. So Maria has been sad for 3 weeks. She can't sleep. So she has insomnia, she can't eat, she has changes in appetite, and she can't concentrate. She's constantly emotional, constantly crying. She has lost interest in her usual activities. Which disorder would she be most likely diagnosed with? Well, it's not 2 years. She hasn't seen those symptoms for 2 years, so it can't be a persistent depressive disorder. She's not showing, or a cyclothymic disorder, and she doesn't seem to shift between two poles. So, ergo, process of elimination, it's got to be a major depressive disorder. And then, people who are depressed are more likely to engage in or blank, it's supposed to be a blank, or repetitively analyzing their feelings and concerns. Rumination, they're constantly going over why they this way, why they are depressed without generally doing anything about it. So from there, we'll finish up with our last two. So we only have about 9 slides left. I'm gonna remove this one. 8 slides, haha. So that was gonna be an activity, but for obvious circumstances, can't really do that. So schizophrenia is known as a severe mental disorder. So it's characterized by disturbances in thoughts, perceptions, emotions, and behaviors. So if we think of someone's personality as a related set of ways they respond to their environment, so schizophrenia is the disconnect. Disconnection of personality or loss of personality. So as the elements, such as the cognitive way they respond, the way they respond emotionally in their environment, the way they perceive their environment, as those lose connections with one another, this person who's suffering from schizophrenia loses connection with their own reality. Obviously, that's going to impair functioning within society and holding a job, things such as that. So it's for some reason it's always been confused as with DID, dissociative identity disorder, but it's schizophrenia. The personality is no longer intact. It's gone. It's broken. So let's go over a couple individual variations. So symptoms usually start in adolescence, so late teens, early 20s. So symptoms can come on gradually, so a bit at a time, or all at once. And then it's one of the few disorders where it's actually seen more in men than women. Are earlier, so it typically affects men and women at the same rate, but it's usually seen earlier in men. So men tend to show schizophrenic symptoms late teens, early 20s, while women, it's late 20s, early 30s. And then it's more diagnosed more often in African Americans and Asian Americans, but that's probably due to a racial bias. Not really going to get into that too much, but your book does a really good job of breaking down what they mean by that. So let's discuss these symptoms. So, and I recommend strongly reviewing this so you don't get these confused. So there's 2 categories of symptoms with schizophrenia. The first one we're going to talk about is, I'm going to bold all of them. Just to make it easier for you to see. So the first category of symptoms is positive. So it's an excess or distortion of normal functions. So it's not like good or bad. So you can also think of it as like something is added into their personality. I'm actually going to delete this picture. There we go. So someone with schizophrenia has to show 2 or more of the following positive or negative symptoms nearly every day for at least 1 month. So a couple of them, and I'll give you a couple examples, are they have delusions. So the person believes these to be true, but they're actually not. So someone suffering from schizophrenia may have persecutory delusions. So that's a common one that you see in the media. So they believe that they're being followed or watched, the FBI or the government's out to get them. They also have grandiose delusions. They feel they're famous, they're a special person. They may believe they're the president of France. They also may have delusions of reference, meaning that they feel that everybody always is talking behind their back about them. Or they may feel that they have delusions of thought control, meaning that their thoughts are controlled by another person or force. They also can have hallucinations, so they perceive something that does not exist in reality, meaning that they hear voices, auditory hallucinations, or they see people that are not actually there, which are visual hallucinations. So auditory is most common. And then right behind auditory is visual hallucinations. And these hallucinations may tell the person to perform acts that may be frightening in nature, such the hallucination may tell them to hurt someone or commit a crime, things such as that. So because the ideas of people with schizophrenia lack connections, due to the loss of connections within personality, call these loose associations. So they may have disorganized speech. They may just toss words together. So that's actually known as word salad. So they think of an example. Let me pull one up actually. So while my example pulls up, so a word salad may be like the cat, long run, sunshine, scream, disappear, understanding land at words, cat is on top, man with a wall, moonlight sing, door, walkers, carpet. Doesn't make any sense to me, me being the, I don't know why I said me, but to the person suffering from it doesn't make any sense. That's what I meant to say. But to the person suffering from schizophrenia, it does make total sense. But their ideas and their speech lack associations between one word and the next. It's almost like the words were tossed together in a sentence, hence the term word salad. So they also have disorder behavior, so they act inappropriately or unusually, they almost silly. So 2 examples of that would be catatonic stupor. So that's like the picture that I deleted. She's in a catatonic stupor, meaning that she feels she can't move. She has to hold that pose for maybe hours upon end. And then catatonic excitement. So they almost like are jumping in their seat. They're like fidgety, excited agitation. And then from there, we have our negative symptoms. So our positive symptoms, something is almost added into the personality. while with negative, something is taken away. So first we have our affect. So affect would be emotion. So they have a blunted effect. They almost show no facial expressions. They speak very monotone. They even when the conversation may be slightly emotional, they just don't have some sort of emotion. They almost seem robotic in nature. Allogia, so they don't speak a lot. They give brief or one-word replies. And avolition, they can't follow through plans. They almost seem apathetic in nature. So someone suffering from schizophrenia can show both positive and negative symptoms. And interesting enough, people who show predominantly or mostly positive symptoms tend to have a less severe course of the disorder and respond better to medication than those who show predominantly negative symptoms. So that leads researchers think that there's a different cause for each type of positive or negative symptom. So finishing up with schizophrenia, just a little bit of research on background on it. So there's a strong genetic factor. So identical twins, if one is diagnosed with it, there is an almost half a chance of the other twin being diagnosed with it as well. A couple of developmental factors. They had a complicated birth. Their mother suffered from diabetes, gestational diabetes, and if they had a low birth weight, they may be more at risk for developing schizophrenia. Family and environment, so that'd be the more social factors. And then, so families that are critical, harsh, confrontational, so poor communicators may put a high-risk person, so someone who has identical twins or parents at more susceptible disorder. So key thing to take away is these all kind of could work together. It's not just like, oh, well, your mother had gestational diabetes, that means you're going to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. No, these all kind of play at hand. Hence why biopsychosocial ways of looking at mental disorders is the most beneficial. So let's do a quick review. So which of the following is a negative symptom of schizophrenia? Catatonic stupor. No, that's positive. Hallucinations. Something is added in. Delusions. Something's added in. Allogia. That's the only one where something is removed. So taking you back. Allogia. That's just the decreased quality or quantity of speech. So they give very few responses to people. And then loose associations and word salad characterize which symptom of schizophrenia. Give you a moment to read. Try and pull up my slides. There we go. A, disorganized speech. So word salad, it almost seems like the words in the sentence are thrown all together and jumbled together. So nearing the end of chapter 13, let's finish up with personality disorders. So we're not going to go through all of these. I'm actually going to only discuss two. But personality disorders are marked by maladaptive behaviors that have been super duper stable over time. Think about your personality. You would probably consider that you've had that personality for a very long time. So it's very stable. So what makes personality disorders very hard to diagnose is they've had these maladaptive behaviors for so long, they don't know any other way to interact with their environment or behave. So it's very difficult to convince them that maybe they need to seek help. So the two that we're going to discuss are antisocial and borderline. So, there we go. So, people who suffer from antisocial personality disorder are often found to be sent to prison and treated more often. Doesn't mean that all criminals have disorder, but antisocial behavior is highly correlated with delinquency and criminal behavior. So, not all criminals are antisocial, though. But one key feature in distinguishing the two between just criminal behavior and antisocial behavior is the lack of remorse and guilt for one's actions. Someone who suffers from antisocial personality disorder doesn't really care what they're doing. They don't feel guilt about it. They don't feel bad that they did it. So antisocial doesn't mean not social. It means opposite to social. Social ways of pro-social behaviors, if you want to think of it that way. Pro-social behaviors that benefit, antisocial behaviors that not benefit society. So people with antisocial personality disorder may not be violent either. They may be con artists, and they may actually function really well in business, politics, or entertainment. To get ahead in business, you may need some feel that you need a lack of remorse or guilt for your own actions. That works really well. That would be a benefit in politics or business, not having or feeling bad for who you've hurt to get ahead. Andrew Cunanan, he actually murdered famous clothing designer Gianni Versace in the 90s, I want to say, after killing several other people. He was described as charming and bright and nice to be around. But he also showed that he had a lack of remorse for the actions that he did when he murdered several people. So they lack impulse control, so they don't care about the consequences of their behavior. If they want to steal something, they're going to steal it because they want it. They don't care about what might happen. Behaviors usually present in childhood or adolescence, so teens. Men are actually diagnosed 3 to 5 times more likely compared to women. And it's found there's a very strong genetic influence. So they may have family members who suffer from it as well, but their parents may actually be neglectful, inconsistent in their discipline, very hostile, and not very warm to them. So as a result of how their parents treated them, they learn to expect such treatment from others and adopt this mistrustful, aggressive stance towards others. Not unfortunately, and I was going to do this in class, and I may be able to get a video out in doing this, but if you want to take the time and look up serial killers, there seems to be a tie between serial killers and antisocial personality disorder, which totally makes sense on the what I've gone through. So, finishing up with borderline personality disorder. So, someone who suffers from borderline personality disorder has an unstable mood, relationships with others, their self-image, so how they view themselves, and unstable behaviors. So, unstable is the clear part of this one. So, one of the seminal books and research and coping with someone with borderline personality disorder is I hate you. No, wait, don't leave me. So their relationships are very unstable because their emotions are very unstable. So they may idealize or admire or cling to a partner, a loved one at first, but if there's like a slight fight or disagreement or conflict, they develop these feelings of abandonment and rejection, So they react to those feelings by being hostile and angry. These can occur for hours or for an entire day. And people who suffer from borderline personality disorder often feel unworthy or bad or empty. They almost feel like they don't have their own personality. So in these extreme, at times they feel extremely insecure, depressed, and thoughts of suicide are common. And this instability results in impulsivity. So they have high risk taking behaviors. There we go. All or nothing thinking is part of it. So either I'm all in or I don't give a crap. I'm done with it. So they may meet someone and then a day later decide they're in love with that person and that they're going to spend the rest of their life with them. So their relationships are very intense, but they're often short-lived. And because of this unstable personality, they have frequent changes of goals, jobs, friendships, because they have little idea of who they are. So one morning they wake up saying, I want to be an actress, and go to bed saying, I'm going to be an astronaut. They kind of flit through different patterns, trying to find themselves. Let's do a quick review. So, which of the following is not a feature of antisocial personality disorder? Lack of remorse, definitely. Poor impulse control, yes. Disregard for the rights of others, yes. So, shy or unsociable. So, like I said, antisocial does not mean not social. It means against society. Felicia is extremely insecure and lacks a clear sense of identity. She often clings to new friends and then hates them a month later. She has an intense fear of abandonment and rejection. Her behavior best fits borderline. So, yeah, she lacks a sense of self. She doesn't know who she is. She has very intense relationships. So she loves them one minute and then hates them the next. And then finally, personality disorder. Let's see, which I'll read through. Stable patterns of malfunctioning, like I previously said. Because they're stable patterns of malfunctioning, meaning they've had these ways of acting their whole life, it makes it very hard to convince the person that they're suffering from it. So usually someone who's suffering from a personality disorder is brought in by someone else, a family member, or with antisocial personality disorder, the criminal system. So that is all for Chapter 13. As usual, feel free to visit the virtual hours. If you have any questions about this, I'll be happy to read. Feel free to email me or reach out to me, and I can kind of further explain things if need be. But if not, have a good day.